Good morning and welcome to Breakfast with Beefcake number 4. How we doing, Vaughn?
Oh man, I'm doing great. This is like the fourth one of these that we've done, right?
This is number 4.
That's crazy. I said to somebody yesterday, well, weeks are just flying by now. I guess that means I'm just having fun.
I've wondered whether it's age, the older that you get, the faster weeks go by, but I think that just the better time that you're having and the better quality that your life is, that has a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
All right, I'm not sure that this might be too early to talk about this guy. I hope that you can handle it. The topic of conversation today is Henry Rollins.
Oh yeah,
That's some
that's a big.
pretty powerful stuff to talk about at 5:30 in the a.m.
You got that right. It's a pretty powerful topic to talk about any day, any time of the day.
Man, I had an impression of Henry Rollins. What little I knew about him was back when I was probably 12 or 13 years old and I was in my skate or die phase when I was wearing a army jacket to school with like a skull and crossbones painted on it.
Yep.
And I had my skateboard and I had my bangs and I held my head way over to the side and I had this badass attitude. And, that was Henry Rollins and his kind of music and really just his attitude, his demeanor was the way that I wanted to carry myself.
Yeah.
And so I just assumed that I knew a lot about him. And it turns out I was wrong.
Yeah. What's the biggest thing that surprised you?
His intelligence, his kindness, his intellect, and his openness to other people's feelings, and his focus on not hurting others feelings. I mean, to be such a strong truth teller, he's also very respectful of other people.
Right.
I listened to this podcast on Saturday, and it's a 2-hour podcast. And I was listening to it in like 10, 15-minute increments throughout the day. And I was out doing weed control or killing armyworms. And every stop that I made to a customer's house, I couldn't wait to get back into the truck because I was so into what Henry Rollins was talking about.
Yeah, he's very captivating when he speaks.
He is. And he's very deliberate.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've never gotten the opportunity to go and see him speak, but I know several people who have. And I remember one of my friends telling me that they went and saw him, and there were probably, 100 people in the room or however many people, and it was just dead quiet for like 2 hours, and nothing but him talking. And the whole room just captivated the entire room for the entire time. You can't help but just be like completely fascinated and focused on what he's saying anytime that he speaks.
That's the way I felt throughout this podcast. And that's why I wrote about him this morning. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about him this morning, was because I'm interested in what he possesses, how he does that. And is that something that we all are capable of having? Is that a gift that only Henry Rollins has, or is that passion and enthusiasm?
I think it's a gift that Henry Rollins has, but I think certain people have that same thing. And I think it applies to lots of different areas. Like, let's say you got a chance to meet Henry Rollins. What are you going to talk about, right? What are you going to say to a guy like that? It has to be something almost, I feel, that's like perfect.
I want to know how Henry Rollins got to be Henry Rollins before he was Henry Rollins. And I realize that sounds like a ridiculous question, but it's easy for me to sit back right now and say, Henry Rollins has to have all the confidence in the world because of where he is. It's easy to sit back and say, it would be easy to be Henry Rollins if you're Henry Rollins. But there was a point in his life where nobody knew who he was, and he's just a punk teenager that has to take all these risks and get in front of all these people and evolve from being a grungy rock and roll guy who's playing in front of audiences of 5 people to being a pretty good grungy rock and roll guy who's playing in front of a few hundred people, who then gets wildly successful and then is capable of transitioning into acting and reporting for the media and writing. I mean, that's a lot of change. That's a lot of risks. That's a lot of putting yourself out there. And that's easy to say now. Well, yeah, he can do it because he's Henry Rollins and everybody respects him. But there was a point in his life where he wasn't Henry Rollins that everybody respected.
Yeah, but I think he's the same guy. I'm sure that he's changed a bit. You know, everybody grows up over time and changes, but I feel like there's an element to his personality and him that is the same. We just get to see more of it.
That's what I'm getting at. I think his authenticity is like 100%. I think he's probably been the same guy forever, but how did he mentally stay the same guy throughout all of this?
Right.
Where was his growth period, or where was his awakening period? It's almost like he would be the same guy whether, like he said on the podcast, whether he was flipping burgers or whether he's on television show or whether he's on a stage, he's going to be Henry Rollins. I don't think he's capable of being anybody else. And the way that he talks is so deliberate and with such intention that you cannot help but feel something when you're listening to him. And that something may be something that you agree with, or it may be passion, or it may be empathy, or you may just hate every fucking word that's coming out of his mouth. But you're going to feel something.
Yeah, but I feel like it's almost like you can't disagree with what he says.
I didn't feel that. I felt like he was pretty open to.
No, that's what I mean. Like, he's so like open and honest that you can't argue with him.
Like, he's capable of making you change your opinion.
Exactly. Right. I mean, I feel like he has a way of talking to you about things where you just feel like, oh my God, I'm an idiot.
Right. He's the kind of guy that you go to collect your $1,000 and you walk away $3,000 more in debt. He talks you out of a couple thousand.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that has to do with his beliefs are so strong, and the way that he comes off is so strong that it kind of makes you question how you feel about things.
Right, but he's also, I feel like, ready to change his mind. Like, if you actually had a better opinion on something, or you were smarter about something, he would totally change his mind and be okay with it.
I think you're right. I think that's where his intellect shows through, that he's not just spouting off at the mouth. He's got things to say. And after he says, he's a conversationalist. After he says what he has on his mind, he's willing to sit back and listen to you speak.
Right. And that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, is when I said, like, what do you talk to him about? If you have the opportunity to talk to a person like that, you better have your shit together and know what you're about to say. You know what I mean? You better have analyzed everything and totally have it understood and ready to speak about it, not just go into it like half-assed.
And I thought about that a lot while listening to the podcast, because somebody's on the other side of that dude. You know, that guy's got to interview him and be prepared for that interview. And I kept thinking, what if we were able to get him on our show? I think I'd make Vaughn ask all the questions. I might not even show up that day.
Well, I mean, just to give you an example, like that podcast that you're talking about, it's what's it called? The Nerdist podcast?
It's on the Nerdist, and the name of the podcast is You Made It Weird.
Yeah. But that guy, he didn't even understand what Henry Rollins was talking about at a couple of points. Like, he's like, Henry Rollins was talking about going to flip burgers. He's like, I'm going to have to go flip burgers if I don't do X, Y, and Z. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? You're not going to have to flip burgers. You got plenty of money. Like, you're a famous blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, it has nothing to do with money. Like, I just have to go do something. And if I run out of things to do, I'm just going to go flip burgers. So I have to make sure I have something to do tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And the guy just couldn't get it was like a few seconds where the guy just couldn't really get his brain around it.
I felt that. And I wanted to believe, when I was listening to Henry speak, that I understand how Henry feels. I feel like what he was saying was he's walking a tightrope all the time. Life makes him be a certain way, and he can be, if he doesn't act like this, he's going to act like that. And so he has to do certain things. He has to stay busy. He's got to stay active. He has to keep his mind fired, or else he's a disaster. I know what that's like. I know what that tightrope is like, and having to do particular things that are very important in your life. And if you don't do those, then there's the other side of you that can come out. And that side is not nearly as functional or as nice or as full of life. Because he
Right.
points to depression and isolation a number of times throughout the interview. What was most captivating to me throughout the whole interview was when he was talking about his level of hatred. What he said was that he thrived on hate. He made it clear, I am not a nice guy. I don't do things because I'm a kind person. And there's a side of that I don't really believe. I think that he is a very kind person. I think that there's a really nice guy there. For whatever reason, he shields that. But he was talking about hatred and giving money to charity, giving money to philanthropy. And he said he doesn't give money because he's a nice guy. He gives money because he hates the things that he's giving money to, such as if he gives the money to an orphanage, it's not because he cares so much for the orphans. It's because he despises the fact that people would leave their children. He hates the fact that there's orphans. That's a interesting twist on what to do with your hate. He made reference to Ann Coulter speaking about Sarah Palin. Ann Coulter said that she, quote, loves Sarah Palin for her enemies. Henry just went nuts on that. He said at one point, having a human as an enemy is not a worthy adversary. That if you're going to hate something, hate a thing, hate a cause, hate something that you can put action behind. That hating another person isn't going to get you anywhere. You know, the only place you can really go from there is physical. Otherwise, it's just hurting you. And he makes reference to his dad when he's like 9 years old, looking at a black guy and making a racist remark, or at least making a racist assumption. And Henry said even at that age, he's like, come on, Dad. Like, really? And he compares it to drinking all the water in the ocean and still being thirsty. That's what that kind of hate is going to get you. He then goes to say, when he finds something that he hates, he moves. He acts on it. And he talks about the West Memphis Three and how much of a part they played in that. And he heard about that. He went to Arkansas and played benefit concerts and raised money and made contacts and had a large part in the DNA testing that got those guys out of jail.
Yeah. Man, that's pretty powerful right there.
He talked about going to different countries and the traveling, and he spoke of going to Pakistan, I believe, him being told you can't go to Pakistan, not as a pasty white American. It's just too dangerous. You know, that's not the place for you to be. So, of course, his next trip was to Pakistan. And he gets caught up, and he's describing just one violent scene, and it was a guy that was beating on a sign with a metal bar. And he said that was the only danger that he ever felt was at that moment. And he said the guy looked at him, and they made eye contact, and he just kind of accepted that if this guy beats me to death, that's a terrible deal for sure, but that's part of the risk. You know, I want my life to be, I can't stay at home and stay huddled up in front of the television and be full of fear and live my life that way, because there's the risk of somebody going nuts, because that risk is always there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I was thinking about that hate. I think there's a lesson for everybody to learn, where if you feel yourself feeling anger and hate towards an individual, can you like think about that and analyze it a little bit and think, what is it that's making me angry here, and how can I switch that from what is it that I hate, and can I redirect that to something else?
I've thought about the same thing. I think that if I pause, I was trying to think of some examples of people that I really just disliked. I thought about how I can deflect that hate from the person to the thing that it is about that person that I hate. And if I could find that, is there action that I could put behind that thing? You know, I think that at the end of the day, the easiest thing is don't don't be so angry and don't hate so much. But
Right.
I think that just having the cop out of, I just hate that person. Well, if you're going to hate something and not do something about that hate, you are either really selfish and lazy, or you don't hate that thing as bad as you believe that you do.
Right. And I think sometimes we say, let's just say, like, when I see you, and I hate that guy, but like sometimes I think we say that, but really maybe that guy just makes me uncomfortable or something else. And there's a way to go, what is it about this Wilson guy that drives me so crazy? What can I do to fix that? Why exactly do I have a problem with it?
I think that most people that I'm close to today, there's been a point in time that was led off with some form of hate. It generally slaps me in the face. I'm like, oh man, I just can't stand Jimmy over there. He makes me sick for whatever reason. And usually the reason that Jimmy makes me sick is that it's a reflection of me.
Exactly.
I see through Jimmy. I know what he's all about. I know what he's up to. And the reason that I know what he's up to is
Because
because
I'm the same way.
that's right. I'm that same slimy bastard that Jimmy is. And I don't want anybody to find out that I'm that guy, but I need everybody to see that Jimmy is. And
Right.
seems like 100% of the time, at some point, that slaps me in the face. And I'm like, oh man, I really like this guy. How many times have you told a friend, I really didn't like you when I first met you? That happens all the time. At least to me, it
Right.
does. But I'm really quick to judge people. I've got a real bad habit of finding what it is that I don't like first and then just setting my crosshairs on that.
Right.
I think that there is a lot to be said for Henry's energy and his passion, that could probably cause you to overlook a lot of hate and BS in life. He was so wrapped up in what he had going on, and he was so wrapped up in his message. I don't think that he's got a lot of time to sit around and think about people that he doesn't agree with. It almost seems like that he's above that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's above that. And I mean, I think if you spend some time reading his work and doing that, I think you could probably almost use him as a gauge to be like, what are you about to do and say, and what would Henry Rollins say about it? If you were, would I say this thing to Henry Rollins? Is it even worth doing or saying?
Man, you say that. He has been my little penny on my shoulder. He's been on my shoulder since I listened to him yesterday. Like everything that comes through my mind, like how would Henry Rollins look at this? What would he think about this? I think that there's so much Henry Rollins in everybody if we want to exude that energy. I put in my blog this morning that he's like 1,000-volt live wire, and the people around him are in the same puddle. You can't help but be electrocuted by him. If you live like that, you make people feel like that. There's results that come with that.
Exactly. You're right on. It's that way for every high level individual. Just as an example, like I have friends that are really good athletes, really good coaches, Well, I know that when I talk to them, I'm not going to go to them like with a fitness problem unless I know that I've got everything dialed in and I can't figure it out. I'm not going to go to them and say, oh man, I just can't do this or that when I'm not eating right or I'm not training like I should be and have everything else dialed in. So I'm not going to go talk to Henry Rollins about this thing if it's something that I haven't really, really processed and thought about and spent time thinking about. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I know exactly what you're saying.
And so it applies to like every high level individual where hopefully we can all get to that at some point, but you can just see it. You can just feel it.
And every high level individual had to work to become a high level individual.
Exactly.
So they had to learn that from somebody. The kind of confidence that Henry Rollins instills in you, when he was closing, he was talking about the road to success and doing what it is that you love to do. He made it clear that you're going to have nights that you play in front of 4 people. You're going to set up all your equipment. You're going to drag all your stuff out there, and nobody's going to show up. That's just part of it. If you can get to a point where somebody writes you a terrible review and rubs your face in the mud, just drags you through it, then at least you've made it somewhere.
Right.
That's further than a lot of people can get. So the fear of getting to a place and then failing, you've made a place. You've gotten somewhere. If you can get to the point of failure, you've reached a point. You've reached a level. I think that there's something to be said for that. And I want to try to carry that feeling, that drive and that power that he has. I'm interested in how to get that and how to make that come out in my life.
Well, maybe we'll get the opportunity to ask him on the show one day.
That would be pretty awesome. And I hope that you'll do a great job when you ask him, because I'll be hiding behind the couch probably. All right. Well, anything else going on today? All good stuff?
All good things, man. All really good things.
All right. Well, another good episode. Good talk to you, Vaughn.
Yeah, you too, man. Have a great day.